Hey Dennis,
Good afternoon.
how's everything going?
Well, now that it's melting a bit, I can get out of the house.
That's a good thing.
By the time I saw you pull up, I couldn't get to the door in time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to bother you. I would have not.
No, it's just, it's a nice new truck there. I got to see the nice white truck.
Oh yeah.
I didn't recognize the truck, so I didn't know who it was when they were coming up.
Oh, I needed to buy a bigger one to fit all my kids' car seats in. So
Oh, geez,
yeah.
especially the new one, huh?
Believe me, if I could have found an old beater, I would have taken it in 2 seconds. Let me tell you.
Unbelievable. Well,
Um,
thanks for dropping it off anyway. It was very informative as always.
yeah,
Nice
anytime.
to see you.
So Stefan said he's going to be a couple minutes late. I'm sure he's bouncing between one together, so he should be here with us any minute, I would think.
That's okay. I don't know if Jim's coming or whoever's coming. No.
I think Jim's traveling today, and then I thought David said that he wasn't going to be able to make it. So I guess time will tell if that is reality or not.
Okay, so it's just gonna be me?
No, I think you and Stefan.
Oh, okay, well, we'll wait for him then.
How long? Somebody asked me, how long have you been on the FinCom, Dennis?
Oh, I don't know. Too long.
Faze was asking me. I said I knew the Board of Public Works was first when Boot was here.
No, it's 25 years on that. I think it's close to, well, when the advisory board took over from Board of Public, that's when I got on the FinCom.
Yeah, that charter change was like 1998, I think, probably.
So that's when I got on FinCom, because I didn't want to get on the advisory board.
Yeah.
So, and been one of those additions ever since.
You're like Cal Ripken. You must have a record for the length of time.
It's getting close. I mean, for a non-elected position, well, non-paid position, it's been a long time. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
You know. Yeah, I don't have it on this phone. I got it on my other computer, my resume with that they require now to get on FinCom. You got to give them a resume every 3 years.
Is that what the term is, a 3-year?
Yeah, it's a 3-year term. So every 3 years now, I got to send them my resume that says retired.
Your resume at this point must be 3 pages long.
Well, it hasn't changed since I retired. I just given them the same one. It's getting close though. I'm not enjoying it like I did before, and I can't stand Zoom. I mean, I like seeing people.
I do too. How many meetings do you figure you have during the budget season at the finance committee? Not even including the subcommittees. 2 dozen? Maybe
The
more?
Subcommittee, there's only 2 that I'm on, other than the nomination committee.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's only 2 meetings, so it's not a big deal. The main FinCom is the amount, the same equal as to the selectmen approving their budget. So, I mean, it's probably 12. So, not a lot, but they're stretching it out every 2 weeks. It used to be every week, starting in January, February, and March. Every 2 weeks, for about 2 hours. There's not a lot of time, but I mean, there's a lot of people that couldn't be on the board and make meetings without Zoom. I mean, it's like, Dan Sherman stays in Maine for 5 days skiing and joins us on Zoom. The last meeting, it was out in Colorado, I think, in Denver. and he called in on Zoom to attend. He was
Wow.
out there last week.
That's where all the snow is, and that's where all the snow can stay for now.
I mean, so it's saving a lot of people by Zoom, and it saves the town money overall because it's recorded and they have a record of it, you know? But, so they don't need a clerk, you know, but it's, I just don't like it. I'd rather have them take a Zoom meeting, but have it in person, just to let Zoom record it. So, but
That
I-
could be coming.
I just wish they, you know, make the FinCom room accessible for Zoom. Spend some money there.
I know that was in the queue, right before COVID basically happened. And then was deferred, you know, with the unknown of what that whole situation was gonna dictate to everyone, so. I'm sure that'll be back up, and it'll probably end up being outfitted like that, I would think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at least, I mean, if they don't have it there, at least have it in the police department, in the, you know, the conference room there, whatever I think. You know, at least it's set up to be able to do stuff. I mean, upstairs is too small, even though it's got a nice TV
Yeah,
upstairs.
how many members are on the finance committee though?
Is 15.
Yeah, it'd probably get a little tight.
Well, yeah, the camera isn't wide enough up there to,
I don't know if I can have all the supervisors here and have the camera be wide enough for us, so.
it is huge. Well, I see Stefan's here. So if Jim's gonna be traveling and Dave isn't gonna make it, so,
So you know what, out of respect for you guys' time, I'll start. If Dave pops on, I'll just backtrack it. We could quickly get him up to speed.
Yeah.
So
Good.
anything we talk about, I had a preliminary discussion with Jim where we were talking about setting the meetings and stuff, so there's nothing that we're gonna go over that he's not aware of already. So we'll just boogie from there. So did everybody, just a little forward, inside the jacket of the binder that I left at your houses, did I included the trash budget in that, right? You got
Right.
that?
I get that.
So there's a little bit of a change in some of the warrant articles since the last time we talked. We've dropped a few of them, so that'll be a little bit abridged. But I'll start on tax and just kind of work through the budget, and if we want to stop and talk, just interrupt. I don't personally need to go through it and wait to the end. Feel free to interrupt and do whatever, and Ann and I will answer.
Well,
Whatever you got.
First, we gotta call the meeting to order. I guess so. We'll do that, and public participation, is there any? I don't see anybody online. And no one's called into you people, right?
No,
No, we haven't gotten anything.
All right, so we'll say no public participation. Now we'll turn it over to you to let you start, Joe.
Okay. All right, so like I said, we'll start with tax, then we'll go through the rest of it. But so going through this one, this year we tried, like every year. It's pretty bread and butter. We're not looking for a lot of frills and things like that. Anything that we're recommended to increase is really just based on, for the most part, our costs going up, or contractual agreements that change year over year.
I understand. How much did you turn back last year and where?
I'd have to, I don't have that in front of me. I apologize. I could send that back to you. If you want, I'll send you tax, water, and sewer.
Yeah, because going through the budget, I can see what you want to go up over last year's budget, but it doesn't reflect the 223 expenditures for me to be able to you know, see if there's any extra money that's normally just rolled over because Steve is, you know, letting you guys roll with existing budgets. And you've only been going up on what you see as needing to go up on, but I don't see it coming down on items that you're not using, you know.
Mhm.
And that's what I'd like to try and start offsetting stuff instead of leaving a kitty there. So you don't need reserve funds, you know, later. I mean,
Sure.
a lot of
Absolutely.
money been coming back by other departments, and I'm giving the same scheme, not just for you guys. It's just, I wanna see us getting back down to a bones budget again. And, if we need a reserve fund, fine, but let's not leave the big float items in, because I saw some items that, you know, I don't see them being used for a few years, and, because they only can go off of the 22. And, I don't see them being expended on yet this year, so I got questions. So
Yeah.
that's just a general comment for all of these items. So, okay, you can go back on your track.
All right. So in the tax levy side of the budget, so we'll start personal services. So anything that was an increase here, it's largely related to collective bargaining agreements between the three unions that we have, clerical, labor, and supervisory. This budget does have in it the new supervisory union contract that is, if not settled, about to be momentarily. So this should not change between now and the finished part of the process. Also on the personal services side, one thing just to highlight, so the town was informed by the state that for a period of time, the state was providing the service of sealer of weights and measures, and the state is discontinuing that service. So Steve approached our group and asked if that was something that we could fit into our day-to-day. We worked with the laborers union, and an individual was selected to take that role on in addition to their regular duties. And in doing that, we had to reclassify one of those positions, but that is now going to be something that lives here in Public Works and that will be taken, care of as we move forward. So we added a new wrinkle into some of the day-to-day that we do there.
Question,
Shoot.
why didn't the town council or Steve look to share that duty with Linfield or one of these other towns?
I can't speak to completely that. One of the things I do know is when the state essentially informed everyone that they were backing out of it, everybody was left kind of scrambling. So there still is the possibility. I can't speak to the situation in Linfield or some of the abutting cities and towns, but there could be the possibility for that in the future. I think the only thing we knew here is that we were coming up, on the new calendar year and needed to have something in motion in place so we could satisfy that requirement. But I wouldn't be surprised if when the mayors and the town administrators and whatnot get together and talk, if that wouldn't be something that would come up. But probably more of an appropriate question for Steve. I have no problem trying to get you the answer to it. I just need to follow back up with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt it weird for Public Works to be asked to do it instead of putting it in inspectional services where it should be,
Mhm.
It just seemed weird to say, a buildings person, taking on a role of an inspector that, I think belongs in inspectional services if it's gonna be kept permanent.
Mhm.
And let one of those people do it. Okay, it just doesn't show how much it is, how much the add-on is. It just, how much did the union agree to let them do it for additional work?
So what ended up happening is the position was reclassified. So one of the foremen changed a grade, and then what we'll probably have to do. I don't have any background on it completely. I know what I estimated the cost, but this is something that as each one of these businesses pays their fees for this service, it should offset completely.
Well, I know they're gonna pay fees to have the inspection, but there's a lot of inspections to be done as far as not just, oil companies, it's all the scales in town, that have to be done. I know it's quite a bit of it that's, Kenny States can attest to what it is,
Yeah.
you know. and-
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was the last one, I think, that did it on the town side before the state took it. But yeah, so you're talking every gas station, every scale and food service place, every postage meter.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit. I don't know what the complete inventory is. I don't think we have a lot of oil trucks in town, but there's probably a handful. So, that's part of it too. So there's quite a bit of it out there for sure. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem though, getting the inventory that was shared by Sherry that, if you calculated and, take a little bit of it at a time, I don't think it's anything that's a super hard task. Just making sure that you're organized and you're working your way through your list to make sure that everything gets what it needs, certified off like that.
Yeah, do we still have the equipment from Kenny States for the jugs and all that stuff to test?
There is some of it, yeah, it was stored in Vinton Street. I know, we'll probably have to, I think some of the weights had to be sent out just to be certified to make sure that, whatever, if it's 1 pound, it actually is, 1 pound and things like that. But I'm sure there'll probably be something that we may need to acquire, but it sounds like we've inherited a good amount of stuff that we can use and get going. And then I know like, so for instance, like the cement company, or maybe even Taylor Moving, because they have some of the truck scales.
Right.
That is something we wouldn't buy that infrastructure because it's specialty. So what ends up happening is a third party comes in and then this person is, representative witness to that, and would sign off on it. So essentially we would need the tools to do the gas stations, the supermarkets and things like that. We're not gonna acquire anything to do 125,000-pound truck lift though. I mean, we only have 2 of them maybe at best.
Right. Okay, I just thought it weird this year, so, okay. All right,
So outside of that, the overtime in all the budgets adjusted just to kind of meet the CBAs. And then in the highway division, you probably noticed that the line item for police details is increased. It's no secret, we have a lot of work going on. This budget, this line was one of the ones in COVID that we cut. And we haven't restored it. Actually, the level that it's at right now is still below pre-COVID. But we want to make sure that we have enough there to make sure that we can take care of, that service that we need from them over at the police department to some of the things we have going on.
yeah,
How's-
can we get, when you put in these items for overtime and all this stuff at the bottom, you don't give any past history as to what you actually spent. It's just what you appropriated. So is there a way of giving us a breakdown on, your overtime from last year, your temporary help, whether you're using it or not, you know what I mean, Joe? I mean, it's nice to have it there and show that, well, you went up, based on contractual for overtime, but if you didn't use it all, do we have to go up? Even though the wages went up, you know what I mean?
No,
I mean,
100%. So I can send you with warrant 55, which essentially closes the year. And you could see either that or inside the expense booklet that's put out for the fall town meeting. It's also, I don't know if it breaks it out line by line. I think it's summarized, but I could get that to you, Dennis, so you can see it.
Yeah, because I've got nothing to compare it to other than, normal escalation, and fine, if you're not using it, again, that's part of my speech. If you're not using it, because it affects the transfers too. over to water and sewer. I mean, it affects other budgets along with this, this overtime and stuff. And I see, you're basically finally up to 100% capacity for employment except one position. Is that correct?
Yes, so I think this time last year, we had more vacancies in the enterprises than we wanted to. We focused on acquisition and retention there. So we are just about at full capacity with the one that you mentioned to get us completely at that point. So it seems like, as you know, the Kevin Boyles and those guys that all started, in the late 80s, early 90s, have kind of gotten, some of them, especially with the COVID thing going on, got to the point where, they were close to retirement, and, Clayton and those guys all moved on to their next chapter, and it all came in such a wave. It took us a little bit to recoup all that, but we're in pretty good shape right now.
And this probably comes under the supervisors union. Why do we still have longevity pay?
There is a portion in their collective bargaining for longevity, and then there's also something else in there. If you're an employee in that union and you have, I think it's over 600 hours of accrued sick time, they're actually eligible to turn a week in for compensation. So that would be to offset that.
Yeah, because I see $2,500 is a big line item for several people in there.
Yeah,
And
so like I'm looking at like Dennis Fazio now. So Dennis, it's longevity. That number encompasses longevity and him being able to take a 40-hour sick week and trade that in, because he's been here for 25 years and the balance is so high.
All right, so I think you ought to make note of that, because I think you're going to get questions from the major board on that, because we're used to seeing the $200-300 for longevity, not $2,500. It's a big increase for what we're used to seeing, and I thought in future contracts it'd be negotiated out, this longevity, by now. But it's negotiated in a different way now that means more money. It's buying back stuff. So,
Joe, are you going through this on a particular page through our, what was hand delivered?
No, well, let's see. Are you looking at it? Are you looking at it digitally or the printout?
The printout.
So I don't have the printout in front of me. I'm staring at an Excel sheet, but I'm basically summarizing, which would be the personal services section, which is probably towards, I think you start off, you start up with a summary, then you go material, supplies, purchase of service. It's towards the back of the tax section now.
yeah, it's not numbered, Stefan. It's a breakdown that has all the employees' names listed. It's under personal services. It starts with administration. And
Yeah, I'm sorry. Usually I have that all tabbed out for you, but I had it on my desk ready to send out last week for you, and then my wife and she went into labor. I had a son born the end of the week, so I was running around scrambling a little bit. So next time I promise to be back to being much more organized for you, so it's easier to follow through.
so it's all in.
Yeah.
Put the stickers on for you. Okay.
Yeah, it's because I forgot to order them too, so I'll take that one.
So actually, do you know when the soft copy was sent out? I can't find it in my email.
I could send it to you right now. Hang on one second.
But Stefan, did you find the administration, the payroll personal services sheet?
In the hard copy, yes.
Probably halfway through the book, or a third of the way through the book.
So I just emailed you the copy that would have been sent out from Jim. Let me know if that comes in.
That's the FY 2024 budget master.
Yeah, so we're in this is somewhere
Gotcha.
between line in the Department of Public Works tab. We're somewhere between line 284 and I think 490, 440.
All right, I'm there.
So that is basically the summary of the tax end for personal services. In purchase of services, which if you're following along digitally, it kind of works backwards. Where it starts at line 285. This is something administratively, we have a slight increase of $5,000. Most of what's in here is all related to licensing, some of the digital tools that we use. We have a little bit of an increase on the admin side for Ann and I. And then in engineering, they have licensing and subscription fees going up for some of the stuff they do. AutoCAD, GIS, GPS, things like that. This is basically all something that we need licenses to use and access. And as those go up, unfortunately, for us to continue using it, we have to keep paying for that ability. Also in purchase of services, there is an increase in buildings for electricity and natural gas. And one thing to note on this too, Dennis, you'll see the transfer from the Civic Center was increased. Last year it was $115,000. This year it's going up to I think 126. Hold on one second.
124, yeah, but on,
So
on,
also,
on engineering,
Yeah.
the NEPD's money.
Yep.
We, in 22, we only spent 71 and we had 150, and you carry it 150. We haven't even come close to 150. Why do we still have 150?
So unfortunately, the way that this report prints that, it gives that appearance. But if you had a printout, and I should probably give it to you next time, of encumbrances, all of that money is under contract and it's encumbered. It's not, as the fiscal year overlaps our construction season, depending on when the contract's finished. But I can tell you that line item is spent every year. This year, we'll probably spend the most of that this spring, and then obviously then we'll have the following year afterwards. If you saw what's encumbered, though, we have a lot of that specific line item that you mentioned there is still payment and requisition for some of the drainage work and different things we did around the lake. And we're not, obviously, we have it under contract, but we're not going to pay the bill necessarily until they're finished and we're satisfied with it. But so it sits in an encumbrance, it's essentially waiting to get requisitions and the project to finish.
All right, that's why in 22, you had 150, but you only spent 71 of it.
Yeah, if you go back and look, the rest of that balance is all encumbered in different purchase orders for some of that drainage work. Just it didn't finish by the time that the printout for the final year came out. That's why it reflects that way.
Okay, it's all right. It just showed out a big amount that I don't see used. So if you can give us a listing of what is anticipated for the 150 this coming budget, it'll help me better understand and what you used 150 for last year.
Sure.
And what you were going, if you haven't expended yet, but it's encumbered to do the project. I mean, I don't like consultants just sitting, consultant money if you're not gonna use it. If you say it's encumbered, fine, I wanna see it what it's being used for.
I could tell you, so I don't like it sitting with consultants either, and one of the things we did, we invested a lot of time in our engineering group and really scaled that up, so we're shovel ready and designing a lot more in-house. 99% of that, with the exception of some of the stormwater regulation testing that we're mandated to do, is going into the ground as infrastructure improvements. So we want to maximize that, improving, some of the things that are aging out in the street, parks and different things like that related to drainage and stormwater.
Yeah, if you just give me a list of what you're doing, because I see them up in my neighborhood walking, looking at the drainage.
Yep.
A couple of months ago, so.
Yeah, they actually have to do that twice. They need to do a dry weather analysis and a wet weather analysis and test. And then depending on what that test comes back at may dictate, different actions. If we see oil in it, we have to chase it upstream, find the source and eliminate it, get rid of any illegal connections and things like that. So that's probably what you saw going on there.
Yeah, I saw the town engineer talking, a consultant truck, they went up by the highway and looked at the manhole up there, the brook runs through the back. So they go down to 128, so I know they were looking at drainage, so. Okay, all right, keep going.
So that's purchase of services, those three things. And then materials and supplies mimics last year. Really, the only increase we're looking for there is in fuel. This is something we take a consumption average over a multi-year period, and then we rely on the Department of Energy through the Fed. They give us an outlook of what the projected costs might be for the year, but that's being forecasted on a macro level. We apply the suggested rate through that to our average, and that's how we come up with a number. That's the
Okay.
only thing.
Under roof repairs, what are we anticipating doing this year?
Capital projects are operating.
No, it's operating. You get $100,000 for roof repairs.
Yeah,
And
so this is, they're actually out doing some stuff right now. So we did, obviously we did the roof at the Civic Center. We had a couple more things we wanted to do there that we used a little bit of that on. There's some leaks that have been popping up. Generally, depending on how the winter goes, sometimes, we might have a good year. I think we have a good year, and then the winter changes things and we find leaks pop up with the snow and whatnot that we're patching. So I would say this year, if you're looking at a present budget right now, you're probably 60% spent doing repair and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you were only down around 8,000 and on $100,000, and the year before you only spent 62 out of the 100. So again, if it was incumbent, I wouldn't know it because you don't go back and refix it once you expend it, in the previous year. I mean,
Yeah.
I
do that. So I mean, so take this summer for example, right? We had a warm, dry summer for the most part. Most of this is leaks, flashing, different things related to that. The weather kind of helps us identify that, unfortunately, and the way that this summer started out, we were kind of light in that area until we started getting some of the telltale signs, towards the fall or beginning of the winter. So.
Okay. Those are just the big numbers that I see, major differentials. And that's why without the list of what you turn back and where it could turn back, I can't compare against it. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. I'll try to make sure you get everything to make that easier for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just touch quickly on snow and ice. So we're not recommending anything to change there. I feel like, knock on wood, every year when talking to Steve about this, I say, maybe this is the year we should think about, upping this. Fuel is a little bit more expensive. Obviously, labor and things like that in that area. There's a general apathy towards contractors and people wanting to do snow removal. And then so far, it seems like for the last few years, we've had light winters. So with this year, to date, following suit. We're not recommending changing anything like that because our baseline's changing, right? So, I'm sure we still have the probability of getting California-like weather. I hope to never see it. But for now, at least since probably 2017, the appropriation has been appropriate and we have not had to go back for a reserve transfer. So I'm going to leave it as is and hope that our luck continues.
How do our expenses this year compare to budget?
So this year, I have multiple windows open in front of me. We've been out probably about 18 times. So anytime we get a call from the police, in our industry, that's like a 911 call for us. I think the available budget left is right around $370,000. Ian might have to correct me there. She's nodding her head, so.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we are right about that, and then we have a few salt bills to put in there.
So I think at this point in time, unless we get surprised by something substantial, you're probably looking at a six-figure return there. I hope that that's the case. I think that would be some good news. We are in New England though, and the weather does seem to have its own agenda. So we're cautiously optimistic. But if it ended today, we're in very good shape.
If it's in very good shape, can we put a new salt site in for this money?
For what's left, probably not. I don't think so.
So that's if we have quite a bit there, then be worth looking at putting something down there to do it.
I will certainly be advocating that when the time comes. I'm not as
well, if we do it,
yeah, I'm not as it's not as foreseeable to me for that to happen. I think that'll probably end up that'll roll back to the general fund, and then it'll be looked at on the grand scale. And I'm sure that Steve and Kevin and the council, the FinCom will all have a discussion based on that. So I'll play a very small part, but that will be something I surely am going to be advocating for.
yeah, because if we have a couple of light winters and leave this normal 850, we should be able to make a big dent in it, especially if we can move it up front. The salt sheds up front, even if we have to kick the MLD out back.
Yeah.
I mean, they got there on a, they can leave on a whim. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I mean that's not too bad of a move for them either. It's not like there's no buildings or anything like that. It's moving a couple of bin blocks around, so shouldn't be too bad.
so I mean, I'd like to see it up front if we can put it up front. I think it's a lot more accessible if we get it up front. Where we have all up back, which is more closer to the wetland, which puts us into more problems. So I just assume the salt shed up front if we can. Okay,
We definitely don't want to take on any problems that we don't absolutely need. That's for sure. All right. So that's really the budget highlights for the year in tax. I was gonna bump over to sewer unless anybody has any objections.
Just to clarify though, the snow and ice removal, if no further snowfall or big weather events for the rest of the year, you would estimate about 300K back to the town.
I'm hopeful. What I don't know, is what's the probability of a blockbuster storm that's going to be, a multi-day event that's going to cost significant funds? I don't know. The further we go, the more diminished that is. What I can't rule out is, there might be a night where we're getting rain. The temperature's kind of iffy. It's hovering around the freezing mark. So I could see us going out and doing some more stuff related to that. But if things follow suit, the way that the year has gone and we see the average daily temperatures start to continue to increase and be a little bit more cooperative to us, absolutely should see a six-figure plus return on that.
Okay.
yeah, you haven't used many contractors this year, right? it's mostly been town trucks on all, at least on my route up here.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of what we've been doing, we really had to use hired help 3 or 4 times. It hasn't been a lot. The bulk majority of it, which happens every year, is really salting operations. But even like this past weekend, the snow came. We still had to move it out of the way, but we had the temperature working for us too. So not that any storm's picture perfect, but that was about as picture perfect could be. It was relatively short. We made quick work of it, and then the temperature cooperated and didn't require a marathon on our part to make sure it didn't refreeze. So it's been light. It'll be interesting, especially with these light winters falling back to back, to see what the interest is in the general public to want to sign on with different communities and be part of that operation. It
Yeah.
could get interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I saw it as, giving them a bone basically on this last storm because like, it wasn't that bad for pushback or whatever. So other than it majority of it was during the day, that would take away some of your forces that would normally be plowing the town lots and stuff like that, that usually cover my street, is your truck at the, your office there, one of those trucks usually plows up here. So I assumed he was tied up all day just plowing to keep your lots open, so that's why the contractors were out, so. But, you gotta give them a bone and they're not even gonna come back, so I understood that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, so we went over the last couple of years, salt was as low as $45 a ton. Right now it's just about $75 a ton, so it becomes a balancing act, right? If we go and use more salt, which is expensive now, or considerably more expensive than what we've been used to the last couple of years, it beats up all the stormwater stuff in the concrete out there, or do we go for a much shorter duration with more help and end up being a little bit cheaper to just push the snow out of the way? So depending on what the weather throws at us, could vary.
Well, if we have a season finish like we had all winter, that salt price will come down to liquidate their pile too. The summer fill-ups that we normally would do anyway, but I think the price will come down considerably to try and move the product.
I can promise you, if that salt price comes down and it's on sale, we're gonna be buyers. That's what we hope to be.
Even though it's an old shed, it'll be full.
We'll figure out a way to fill it to the top. I can guarantee you that.
Okay.
All right. So moving on to the enterprise and sewer. So a couple of highlights to this year. So our preliminary estimates from the MWA came out on the end of February. We're seeing a small increase in sewer comparatively to some of the ones that have happened in the past, approximately $26,000. Our overall budget increase, including the assessment from the MWA, is 2.1%. If you discount the MWA and look at everything else, the increase is about 1.86%. In sewer, we find that the assessment through the MWA is roughly 75% of the total overall budget there. Much like tax, the employees have contracted step increases related to the collective bargaining agreements. There's adjustments to the overtime calculation to make sure that we beat that. We carry something called an admin expense. Basically what that is a transfer from the enterprise over to the tax collector's office for some of the work that they do for us, making sure that the payments are processed and things like that. So in each enterprise, that goes up $3,207. Enterprise is being self-sustaining in sewer. We have to fund the insurance for the employees there. That's up $31,201. In purchase of services on sewer, we have some small increases for utilities, heat, and electricity. The other thing we have in here, which is new, is a line item for pump rebuilds. So what this is, outside of the major pump station that we have on Farm Street, we have 18 pumps throughout town that take sewer from low-lying areas and push it up to where gravity can feed it. What we found over the last couple of years is we end up rebuilding 2 or 3 of them a year. These run essentially 24/7 and never really shut down. So rather than having to go back to capital and Band-Aid, not be ready for this, we added $40,000 line in that. So every year we're going to rebuild 3 to 4 pumps and cycle those through. So through a period of probably 4 to 5 years, each pump will be serviced and rebuilt. This is something that obviously nobody wants to go down, because if it's not getting pumped out of the way, the only direction for the sewer to flow is backwards, and that would not be an awesome thing for some of the people in the areas close to this. Materials and supplies in sewer, it's level funded, there's no increase there. And then in the maturing debt line, you hear myself and my predecessor used to talk about all the time. Through the MWA, they offer an inflow and infiltration loans. And we were fortunate, they've done 14 phases of it. Most of them are $1 million loans that you would get 75% of that, so $750,000 for free. And our portion, we'd be responsible to pay back as 25%. We've used every single offering for that we've been able to. We've taken advantage of every single time. About 2 years ago, we found ourselves at the end of it. We didn't know if they were going to continue the program, what we were going to do. We were going to do it through operations. We were going to have to bond. And then, as luck would have it, a much talked about program extension actually happened. So this year, we're eligible for a new phase 14 loan. We'll be able to do that work. We'll have to pay $32,750 over 10 years. And we'll get $1.3 million in work done out of that. So it's a real no-brainer for us. We're ready for it. So we're going to seize the opportunity and take that. That's kind of the highlight of sewer. If we have any questions, I could stop. If not, I can go into water. It's up to you guys.
On your sewer, on your master budget summary.
Yep.
You gotta correct the right-hand column, the adds and deducts. You got it as the same, and obviously it isn't.
Yeah, you're probably in the general insurance, I would think, right?
No, it's, if you look at the page 1.
Yeah.
Under master budget summary.
Yep.
Under the sewer.
Yep.
The last column, increase or decrease.
Yep.
They're identical, and they can't be identical with or without the MWRA.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That was a typo in the version that you got. That's been corrected.
Okay.
I spoke to the correction. Yeah, there was a formula that was in that didn't get carried. You're 100% right now.
I just didn't want it to go to the town council wrong.
Yeah, no, Dennis, that was an alertness test. You passed with flying colors.
Well, that's the easy one.
Yeah, that's been taken care of. You guys got it with the error in it, but that's
It's so easy. I wanted it to be taken care of. Okay. Okay, you can go on the water now.
okay. So on the water side, this is the biggest increase of any of the budgets that we have this year.
Oh, he's froze on me.
Our assessment with the MWA. The MWA themselves and their assessment to us this year, their rate to us went up 4%.
Oh, Joe, you froze there for a little bit.
Oh.
Would you mind starting over again?
Sure. So what I was going into is the assessment for the MWRA. So this is the biggest increase in any of our budgets across the board this year. And what I was going into is a couple of things that play with this. So this is assessed to us. This bill is essentially for the previous calendar year. It's meter consumption through the town. Last year being very warm, and very dry. We found that consumption overall across the baseline is up. We've also noticed that our baseline consumption in town is starting to grow. So if you look at, our meter inventory from an inch and a half and above, which is generally some of your bigger, more commercial properties, that is starting to increase, and it only makes sense, right? So you have a building like where Metcalf and Eddie was on Foundry Street. We went from whatever the office population was in there part-time to now, 90, 100 units, 3 bedrooms. That's starting to increase as that goes on. Some of the other things that we had going on, obviously, capital work, different flushing programs related to disinfection there, and whatnot. Lastly, obviously we could pump, we talked about this a bunch of times, we could pump about 10, maybe 15% of our total consumption through our treatment plant at Broadway. Part of our regulatory testing this year, in July, we received an unfavorable result that required us to work with the DEP and figuring out what caused that. You probably hear about PFAS, all on TV and whatnot. I think a publication just came out. They actually found it in some ponds in Saugus, believe it or not. What this is, it's DuPont's essentially forever chemicals. We have to test for that quarterly. At no point in time have we ever been in violation. We typically test, about 50% of the threshold that Massachusetts requires us to be under. But we had an abnormal test and we went high. So water production is kind of like medicine, right? Once you give medicine to someone, you can't take that back. So you need to be absolutely certain that you're well within the regulations that you need to be. We worked with the DEP to go through this, to troubleshoot, make sure that we understood exactly what might cause this. Are there any contributing factors on our end, on the lab end, and whatnot. Unfortunately, that took 6 months to get them to approve us going back online. So as consumption got high in July and August, we were shut down because we were working with the DEP to go through this. I can report that in January, we satisfied everything on their end that they asked us to do, and they gave us the green light to go back on. The puzzle of the whole thing is, we had essentially one test result that came back higher than normal. And as soon as we started retesting and working our way through the motions, we came right back to normal. Unfortunately, you're not going to get a one shot before they allow anything to turn back on. We need to prove it in succession to make sure that we don't have anomalies here. What exactly happened? We don't know. Our raw water test fine, our finished water is testing fine somewhere in the chain there. We had something happen. You can't pinpoint it. It almost seems to me that there was a laboratory contamination, but unfortunately, with the way that the contaminants that we're testing are regulated, that number is that number, and then we need to work through it. Again, we weren't in any violation. There was nothing that was unsafe for anyone. The water in that lake is the same water that's been coming out of that lake since 1900. We had one test that was unfavorable, and unfortunately had a multi-step process to go through that. So when you get through the end of that long explanation and all those factors coming in, one of the things that we're fortunate on is we can switch over to the MWRA, who measures all their water at non-detect. It's some of the best water in the country. Unfortunately, in that reliance, we're using more of their water to get billed for it. If you go through the budget, so we're about 16.5%, including that. If you take that portion out and look at the budget as a whole, we're up about 4.9%. In water, our assessments roughly 46% of the total operating budget. Again, like the other two, there's the personal services aspect to it. The admin expense that I mentioned in sewer is exactly the same here. Group insurance for water is up $45,000. So that's based off of the vote of the GIC. And however those rates change, we get that after the benefits budget is passed. And purchase of services and materials and supplies. Both of those groups are level funded, so we're not asking for anything more there. And the only other increase that we have here is a line of maturing debt. We talked about last year replacing the tank at Hart's Hill, which is out to public bid right now. What we were hoping to do at the time was borrow the $5 million for the project and get an interest rate that would essentially keep our budget neutral. As the Fed kept raising rates, and it seemed like, every time we took another step forward, the Feds jumped up again. We had $2 million available to us from the MWA to borrow interest free. The only problem with that is the payback on it was 10 years. So we incurred, more of an accelerated payment. But if you look at the long-term gain, we got $2 million at 0%. So with the uncertainty of the Fed, the decision was made to utilize that to save as much as we could in the long end. We ended up borrowing $3 million additionally through the treasurer. And that is water.
Just a quick question, a recap of the MWRA assessment.
Yeah.
So the total 718K
Yeah.
increase in that, and the main factors of that is the base load increase due to just the new construction that you had mentioned.
So it's I wish I could explain it and say it's dynamic. I wish I could say it's this one thing, it's just these two things, but when you start to unravel the circumstances surrounding of it. So yes, our baseline seems to be growing. We have a small window of that, probably a 3-year window that we're looking at, but it seems like for all intents and purposes that will continue. The other thing is our rate, we buy water from them wholesale, X amount of dollars per million gallons. That cost went up 4%. So that's a cost that they put onto us. The other piece to that is what we usually can offset through our own pumping. We missed probably about 60% of what we normally would have pumped because we were working with the DEP to make sure that we didn't have a bigger problem on our hands there. So it was a whole bunch of different things that kind of added to that. And then, you add in, you look across all the communities in the MWA as a whole, June, July, August, and even September, because of the way the weather pattern was thrown at us, it was super dry and hot. So, seasonal fluctuations impacted that too.
Okay, and then you had also mentioned that additional water was needed because of the PFAS issue.
So yeah, so what would happen is normally we're permitted to pump 214 million gallons out of Crystal Lake. And when we had that test, we had to shut down. And when we shut down, we were working with the DEP. We couldn't put any other water back into the distribution system for two parts. One, to make sure we were working with them to make sure no stone was left unturned to figure out why we got the result that we did. And then, two, well, it's both. So they needed to know, and then we wanted to know. We weren't in violation of anything. We didn't pose any risks to anybody. We were well within our parameters. But this is something that, across, especially like southern Massachusetts, is bankrupting water corporations. We're lucky. We have probably the best source of water on the planet, as our mainstay. Unfortunately, in this, by not being able to supplement that a little bit and drive the assessment down, we're relying on them more, which we were paying for.
But again, next year, our consumption will be off of last year's, which will make a big difference too. So next year's rate will be different.
It is. So if you remember, in some of this, why really still the increased percentage number, it's a little bit skewed because if you remember the year before, we had a great year pumping. We were able to maximize the times that we were pumping. So we were putting out as much as we could. We actually lowered the assessment by $200,000. So we're coming off a year where we had an excellent performance, and then all this, the things that I just got into now kind of skew that a little bit. But this year, I know they've been pushing 750,000, 1 million gallons a day. So we're right back to where we need to be. There's probably some seasonal stuff that may require a little bit of downtime in the summer, but we should be right back to where we need to be. All of our regulatory stuff is where it's always been. So hopefully this time next year, you're gonna see that, there's a potential for that to decrease again.
In the MWRA assessment that we're currently paying in FY 23. So that's on track to essentially exhaust the appropriation for FY 23.
So what they do is, that assessment is based on calendar year, so that number represents the amount of water we consumed from January 1, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. So
Okay.
next year, the monies that we'll be asking for in the budgets will be from January 1 of 23 to December 31st of 23. That's how they run this. These are preliminary numbers on both water and sewer, so there is the chance, depending on how the executive board over there votes, it could change. With COVID, we saw a pretty good reduction there. Water tends to go down a little bit less, but unfortunately, we don't get that number from the MWA to sometime late in June. So the only thing we can use is the preliminary, more conservative budget number that they send us.
Okay. And do you anticipate any return of funds on this particular line item?
In that particular line item, no. There will be a small return in both the enterprises. You're probably going to talk it'll be less than $100,000 per, I would think. We'll get a better idea of that as the spring starts to move forward.
Okay, and then no need for a general fund transfer or anything, reserve fund transfer?
No, so at this point in time, give me anxiety to have to know that I need to come into you and have to ask for a reserve fund transfer. So I think all signs indicate now collections are healthy in the enterprises, the tax levy looks fine, so we should be totally fine. And I don't anticipate, outside of a totally unplanned disaster of large proportion, that we'll be asking for anything other than comments at the next meeting. We shouldn't be in for anything like that.
Okay, I noticed too, from year over year, the appropriation for the MWRA line, it decreased from FY 22 to 23 by about 200K.
Yep.
And now, so we're seeing, the 700K increase from 23 to 24. Looking forward, do you envision that, we'll just continue to see increases here on this particular line? And so that, reducing the budget in the future is not appropriate.
So I could speak to that in this regard. So in my tenure since being appointed, one of the things we focused on is making sure that our timing for when we're operating manufacturing water is consistent with our highest consumption, because we can make it significantly cheaper for what we buy it for. Case in fact is the reduction that we had. We were able to offset that. I really believe last year was a complete anomaly. So if we take out, the situation related to that unfavorable test that we experienced, we probably would have been in the same place. But our goal is to make sure that that line item is stable as it can be. What we don't want to see is the thing yo-yoing up and down every year, because it's tough to plan the future, and it's tough to, be able to accurately do that. We wanted to make it as smooth as possible. So I don't think that would be something that we will continue to see that. We're hoping that planes off. There could be a little bit here and there. Not knowing what happens if like Water Power Parkway completely once 200's built, and then if there's a change to like where the Lord Wakefield is, that might shift us a little bit. But important to note there, though, even as those buildings come on, those buildings are also, they're paying too. So this water that's used was sent out in the bills and collected as revenue too. We won't know, exactly what that picture looks like until the end, but it's the long way into your answer. We're working to make sure that that is as stable as it absolutely can be, and that we limit the amount of surprises or uncertainty that might come up.
Okay, and I know this has come up in a couple of our other finance committee meetings. I think this Doug Butler has mentioned this before. But I know we have sort of a tiered system now
Yep.
for costs determined by usage. And I think the question that was asked last year was whether or not we have enough data now to be able to do an analysis as to whether or not that cost structure, how it's currently structured, is still appropriate to recover all the costs for current use and how we are using it today.
Yeah, so the whole, as we changed over administratively, I don't know of the last time that a cost of service study was done. So we felt that at that time it was opportune to bring in a third party to do that. What we found out is there's actually Mass General Law that talks about ascending rates. We have a permit from the MWRA as a withdrawer from their system, where it's actually required of us too. Financially, what I can speak to is the way that it's set up and the way that it was designed, at least in the first couple of years. Our largest customer base is residential homes, is about 7,000 and change. The goal of the onset was to keep that as minimal as possible, and reflect the resource for the other tiers. That is something that we've never had a year where we haven't had enough in the collections. We've always generated some retained earnings at the end of the year. We've never had a shortfall to this point. So appropriateness, like if you're talking about like maybe going back to like a flat rate across the board, or you just wanting to make sure that the way that it's set up is capturing all our expenses and making sure that the finances are healthy.
Yeah, I think for responding to the former, I'm sure there's quite a number of people that would like to go back to the flat rate structure.
Yeah.
However, yeah, regarding the latter, I think that's more my question, and I think the general concern that was raised by Doug last year.
Yeah, so I think from a financial standpoint, this is something still, if you looked at the workbooks and the spreadsheets we go through every year, the amount of data that we look at is staggering. We'll literally go through 36,000, 37,000 bill files and make sure that we don't not turn over one stone. And I think the enterprises are healthy. Selfishly, I wish they were a little healthier, because we have a lot of capital stuff out there, things that were getting to 50, 60 years old that we'd like to start addressing a little bit more aggressively, but we have a solid approach, and we're moving in the right direction to make sure we handle everything and try to keep costs as minimal as they can be.
Okay, will we be talking about capital a little bit later?
So that is something that is going to come up. I think it's a different FinCom meeting. I think either the end of the month or early April. I wasn't prepared to talk about it now because the capital planning committee isn't done. What I do have to review, I have a couple of changes to the warrant articles we talked about. Two of them have actually dropped off for now, and I was going to review trash really quick if you want to get into that.
Okay, I didn't want to keep us off track. I know you just mentioned capital, so we can wait to talk to that. Ready?
Do you have anything else on this, Dennis, or you want me to go into the town meeting stuff?
I'm fine on the way you're doing the water and sewer rates. I think with the staggered system, it makes the average homeowner a little more conscious of what they're doing with their water to make sure they don't hit the second tier, which most families won't hit. I mean, commercially, hitting the second tier isn't hard. I mean, but the average family, I don't think is, and you may have data on that Ann could supply to say, the average family is always basically in the first tier of their consumption, chart. And that of the 7,000, maybe 500 maybe in the second tier, you know what I mean?
So
people that have the lawn sprinkler system, that it's their choice for that luxury, you know what I mean?
You're dead on. So I know I don't know what the current year is off the top of my head, but I know like the first year, over 50% of the generated bills. So, you know, we generate roughly 36,000 bills a year. 50% of those never got out of the second tier at that time. And I think about 35% generally don't get out of the first tier. The worst tier across the board, I mean, the worst quarter across the board is obviously the summer months, and then the end of the fall, because, you know, daylight's longer, we're outside, we're enjoying things. But then, you know, you find that typically in January, things start to tail back off again. So it'll fluctuate, but if you're interested in that number, we can give it to you, give you an exact breakdown of how many bills fall into what, but you're basically right on with your thinking.
Yeah, that was the type of information that Doug, I think, was trying to drive at and understand. Because, you know, the demographics of the town are changing as well.
Yep.
And, you know, whenever those rates were set, maybe they don't make sense anymore. And, you know, for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, we can, so what I'll do is, once we conclude, Ann and I'll follow up. We're gonna put a whole bunch of stuff together before we meet again anyway. But I'll send out, I have some notes in front of me, some of the stuff Dennis was asking for, plus this stuff. We'll get that to at least the subcommittee in advance, so you have time to take a look at that. And if you have any questions, we're here every day, so don't be shy. We can clarify anything, spend as much time as you want going through whatever you want.
Well, I think with what we see now with the residential houses, even the remake of houses, is people are putting in for the $1 million homes, they're putting in the lawn sprinkler system that are in that 1 meter rate. Most of the new houses, you can correct me if I'm wrong, only bring in the one service. They don't bring in the separate service for the sprinkler system because the developer doesn't want to spend the money. So a lot of this consumption in the summer is lawn sprinkler systems that get a lot of these people to the second tier. And you may be able to address that if you know how many houses are on lawn sprinkler systems that use it in the summer.
So when you were on the Board of Public Works and there was the policy, you had to have a separate service for
Right.
those systems. I know that number exactly. What I don't know is if you were to install one, let's say, that I don't know. We have done some evaluation of that, trying to look at consumption fluctuations, and figure out where we think or what accounts we think might be using, you know, water in that capacity, that we could totally share.
Yeah, because I know you get a leak like I had down at the social club, which we found again this year, another one that the snowplow hits and knocks a head off. And when you're using the lawn sprinkler system, which we have a separate meter that Stefan doesn't know about, but we have a separate meter, it just skyrockets, and you can see how high it goes with just one sprinkler head being not as a sprinkler head, but just an open tap. And boy, I mean, it makes a big difference.
That and leaking toilets are silent killers too.
Yeah, leaking toilets do it, and that's why I'm saying sprinkler system with the newer homes, they increase the consumption, but those people are paying it in their sewer bill too, because they only get the single service. And that makes a big difference to the people if they don't watch their watering in the summer. Okay.
All right, so I'll just quickly go through the warrant articles. So we're gonna have 3 definite. I talked about the cremation garden last time. Need a little bit more time on that. I got messed up last week for finalizing that, so that might be something that comes in just before capital. And if it does, I will reach back out to the group and talk about. But essentially, what we have is our article every year for eminent domain for $1, just giving us the ability to take easements should we need them. Really, the best way to explain that is it's to break glass in case of emergency or an insurance policy, should something pop up, that we need to act on. Outside of that, there will be a warrant article for the sewer borrowing, that I mentioned, to authorize that to do that. Again, 25% will be our payback on 1.3 million, and 75% of that we will be getting, for nothing. And then the last article that is 100% going forward is refuse, which we talk about every year. And I'll just share. It won't let me. Apologize. If you look at the spreadsheet that I included as the handout in the front of the books that I dropped off. So what we're expecting this year, contractual increases for operating the hot street, our trash contract, and things like that. We have a separate contract for recycling and refuse collection, and then disposal is bumped up a little bit. The overall budget's going to go up 3%, and then if you remember the town council voted to implement a fee for bulk items, so things that don't fit in the toter. And we're anticipating this year, based off of the revenue numbers that we've seen, that approximately $120,000 would be needed in the trash budget will be offset by that. So we come in at 2.370 million for that program this year.
What do you got for equipment maintenance for 30,000?
So if you remember, we bought a screener for the hot street. We have that, and I don't have a budget line item for our street sweeper. That is something that we've plugged and played in all kinds of different places. We want that thing. I know definitely. So the screener, if you've been down in the hot street since we got it and looked at the amount of material we were able to move out of there for nothing in process, that thing runs every day. There's somebody making material out of what we generate, so we can either reuse it or dispose of it as cheap as we can. So there's going to be some maintenance required to that because the hour meter on that's constantly spinning. The other piece is the street sweeper. So our street sweeper is going to get as busy as it's ever been, and constantly be out on the road. It started last year, and we're going to continue to do that.
I know we got a grant to buy the street sweeper 20 years ago, for cleaning around the lake. I
Yep.
don't know if there's another grant available to get another one.
I haven't seen anything where we could do something like that, at least directly. I'll put it this way, if one does come up, even if I have to get rid of a machine a year or two too early to get another one for nothing, we're going to do it. There's been some larger grants that have come out, but they're basically really like community-based, where Linfield, Wakefield, Reading would kind of share resources. I haven't seen anything for equipment yet, but I know I look at it all the time. Ann looks at it constantly, so we're always looking to see if there's something we can get. We really beat up the state trying to get our screener for free because of the way we're composting and turning discarded material into usable products. So we're looking under every rock and every corner for any money that's available to us to take, away from this stuff. If I see it, you'll be the first one to know, though, if it qualifies for a street sweeper. I can promise you that.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at street sweeper maybe because of the rail trail that, it's gonna need to be swept. So I didn't know if there was any grant to sweep the rail trail.
So, another, that's a great point, because like when Reading did their tip project downtown, I believe they got a backhoe out of the state, to maintain some of that. So that's something we're going to look into that, if we can get that. But you're right, depending on what the trail comes in, there could be a need to change something so that, the street sweeper keeps things clean, but doesn't deteriorate, that nice, beautiful asset that's about to be built. So if there's a will and a way, we're going to explore it for sure.
Well, I know
Oh,
it's
did-
not as big as a regular street sweeper, but something's gonna be done to clean up down there, even if it's a vac sweeper to go down there, you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
So I was just wondering if, you know, if there's something in that rail trail grant that for maintenance to be able to get a sweeper out of it.
If there is, I can guarantee you we're gonna ask for it.
Okay,
Just curious, does that also include maintenance for the rail trail during the winter time, like for snow plowing? Similar to how they do like the Minuteman Trail?
I'm not 100% familiar with how they do the Minuteman Trail. Once that gets built, I'm sure that's gonna be something kind of like around the lake that's gonna want to be used Route 65. So, I think what I'm expecting it to be constructed out of, we already have the equipment to do that. If we don't, it'd be a small modification to something that's existing in a fleet, which shouldn't be, you know, more than a couple $100,000 maybe to make sure that it's completely fits. So
Yeah,
I don't
no-
anticipate, I don't anticipate needing anything special. Should we, or should we identify that there's something special that either makes our asset last longer, or provides a better service, and there's a grant available for it, we will absolutely be applying for it.
yeah, normally a pickup truck or one of our sidewalk plows would be able to open that up, no problem.
Honestly, you'll know, Dennis, probably what you're gonna go down there with is one of our smaller, snow blowers from the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Make a pass or two in one direction, turn around and come back the other way. Probably won't be a pickup truck just because of what it is, but, you know, I'm confident in whatever, however that turns out and whatever we need, we either have or we can arrange to have, pretty quickly, and not require, you know, some sort of appropriation to do it.
Yeah, it's a snow blower, you know, sidewalk snow blower should be able to get around any post they have at the end of street crossings to go around.
Yeah, yeah, and they have to be designed so, you know, we need to make sure an ambulance can get in it. You know, things like that. So we'll have room, you know, will we have room to run the front end loader through it? Probably not. We don't want to be doing that anyway, but we'll make sure that thing's going to be busy. So we'll be ready for it.
Okay, I'm set.
So that's everything for me in a nutshell.
I did have a question about roadway maintenance.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know this is probably, you probably always hear about this, but I know, at least from a funding perspective, the roads receive funding from multiple sources. The time in which those funds can be used changes depending on the source that you're talking about.
Mhm.
Right, am I correct in assuming, in stating that the Chapter 90 funds need to be spent within the year?
Generally, no, not for that. But if the state does a supplemental appropriation to that, so they did something last year, they called it WRAP funding, winter recovery, something. That they gave us a limit on, and said, you know, you have X amount of time to expend this fully. With all the stuff that we got going on, that was an easy one for us. Chapter 90, no. You know, typically it's a supplemental appropriation or a grant that'll give you a boxed in window to say, you know, you need to have this done by X amount of time.
Okay, and so the work that was done on North Ave, that was a grant, correct?
Yep. So
Okay.
sometime this spring, they'll be out, they do finished paving of the trench. And then with the second part of the grant project, which is the expansion of the sidewalk, it's gonna get widened. You notice the telephone poles have been moved back, so we could do that, not have any vertical obstructions. So that'll be going on too, but that was all through a program called MassWorks. So we got a water main upgrade and they call it shared use path, but essentially a widened sidewalk to accommodate multimodal transportation. That was through a grant.
So the gas lines are still being replaced, at least here within my community.
Yeah.
And this is over on the west end.
Yep.
Do you know, I guess is, on that particular project, will we be seeing a lot of road reconstruction done with all the houses being hooked up now to the gas lines?
So the way that we've kind of coordinated that with the gas and light department, they're typically, the engine of the train, they start, they do their underground, then we'll come in, we'll look at the sewer, and anything we might have to do there, we'll take a look at the water and make sure we do that. But in your neighborhood, coming up soon, as soon as they finish, they'll be doing some water work on Cedar Street this summer too. Once the underground's done, then the roadway and sidewalk project comes in behind it. And, when we leave, the goal is to have everything buttoned up that we need to address and that we don't have to come knocking on your door telling you about another project for 20 years. So,
Okay.
yep, that starting is the first step of the whole thing, getting redone with the pavement, this, the Grand Valley.
Okay. And any other issues with road reconstruction? I think last year you had mentioned that there was sort of a pent-up demand for roadway reconstruction for pretty much all communities. And because of that, we were seeing higher costs and, the initial, I believe it was the initial bonds that we had approved for roadway maintenance for, a number of years. That money was not going to stretch as far as we originally anticipated. Do you still see more of that in the future?
No, I mean, as far as costs, really depending on what fuel oil, what crude is doing, may fluctuate the asphalt a little bit here and there. That's been pretty good.
Okay.
The biggest hang up for us is, redoing these streets. We chose to install a lot of granite curb where it might have been missing. And it was twofold. So the quarries didn't have enough on the labor end to manufacture it. And then you had an in-swell of ARPA money and things like that. So people that weren't doing projects with granite curbing, were to use the cheaper asphalt or something like that. We're doing that. So there's an influx of that. So the lead time on some of that lagged, which pushed some stuff off. But, for everything that we have scheduled this year, I don't anticipate any issues with that. We had everything in well in advance to make sure that once we get going, we kind of don't want to stop until Mother Nature tells us that that's going to be the case for the winter.
Okay. I know when we started off this whole the bond process, you had a map drawn up with all of the streets and roadways for the town of Wakefield, and it was color coded by I guess extent of need for reconstruction or repavement.
Yep.
Do has there been other iterations done to that over time?
No. So believe it or not, that is something that we plan on doing an upgrade to this fall. So once we wrap up, most of our construction season, we're going to redo that. We gave you a baseline number, which is a grade 1 to 100, and we're shooting for an 80. So we'll have an update to that because what we're going to have to decide is, as a community, eventually at some point in time, the bonds are going to sunset, and what is the level of maintenance are we going to recommend at Public Works, and what does the town want to see us doing to make sure that our roads are in the best shape that they can be? So probably, I would say sometime around Halloween, in between Halloween and Thanksgiving, we'll have that updated, and then at a council level and even a FinCom level, if there's interest, we could represent that and kind of show, here's what we asked for, here's what our approach was initially, here is, how it scored, before we did any work, here's how it scored to this point, and then a recommendation for the future. So it's coming.
Yeah, that would be really helpful because, it was something that was, heavily relied on, or at least looked at when we were going through the approval process for the bond, for the initial bond. It would be great to see an update to that, and essentially see the results of the work that's ongoing.
Wow.
Even a before and after snapshot that's great to see progress.
Yeah, we have to do that, right? So the whole mindset of the thing is to make data-driven decisions to hit the projects at a time where we're maximizing our expenses. You know, if we defer to a point, the longer you defer, the more expensive it gets. So this would be the same thing. You know, we will see. Hopefully, what we'll see is, you know, the baseline average score for everything start to bump up a little bit. And then, you know, maybe we put ourselves in the position after this first influx of bonding that, you know, we don't need 2.5 million a year. Maybe $1.5 million does it. So now we can maintain. But we'll know, we'll have a better idea come the fall of exactly where we stand. And then I'm sure that'll be presented over and over and over again at length. So we can make a good, well-informed decision about how we want to fund that moving on.
All right, and now I guess just one other comment that I wanted to make too is on the capital items. We had as a finance committee towards the end of last week's meeting, we started to talk about sort of the funding forecast for the determining the funding forecast committee, and some things, some of the new numbers that they were looking at, and so I'm not sure if it will impact capital, how we approach capital, but I guess it's just one thing that I wanted to make you aware of for this upcoming you know, capital request. I'm sure that the capital planning committee they're going to be well brought up to speed on this, as you know, a lot of the budgets and negotiations are finalized for some of the other committees, some of the other departments.
Yeah, I do know that the committee started talking about that on Tuesday, and they've reached out to, I think, Joe Bertrand about that. So the conversations are happening, but I appreciate the heads up. I'll be on the lookout. Make sure
Okay.
they're too.
Well, a lot of it depends on what the schools do as to impact and everything else with their budget. So that's what we're more concerned about. That's going to affect capital outlay, which is the first thing that you see in the line of cuts to afford the school department's budget. So, I mean, do you have any major items that you've got on your wish list this year, Joe? Obviously, there's always going to be a truck here or there that's always on your list to maintain the inventory. So is there anything of any big nature beyond the average pickup truck and dump truck with plow on it? You don't have any new standards or anything coming on board?
One, the fleet request this year is pretty light compared to what it's been in the past. We're actually looking to see if we can replace a truck that we bought in 1997. I think in listening to them, they haven't talked to all the department heads yet, so they haven't moved everything or queued anything completely yet, but it seems like the group is going to be able to work that number down to where Steve is looking for it. We are going to, at some point in time, we'll have to talk the Soldiers and Sailors Monument on the Upper Common. We're going to be applying for a grant that's through the end of the week, next week. We get $100,000 to pay for some of the upgrades to that. There will be some additional town side funds that, you know, might be ARPA, might not. That conversation will be happening. Outside of that, I think at some point in time in the next couple of years, you'll probably see the fire department looking to upgrade one of their pumpers. Usually
Right.
a warrant article though, but nothing so big, you know, that's an albatross in the, you know, in the program, or to the point where you're going to be looking at a separate warrant article that's quite substantive. Not yet, at least not this year.
Okay. All right, I just didn't know if we had on public works side any major purchases, you know, or whether the water department has to replace any major stuff under capital.
So they're looking at the high velocity truck right now, but I think from a cost standpoint, the price of those things kind of is what the price is, but it's not something that could be minimally absorbed. You know what I mean? So it's not, you're not going to add anything in that's either going to cost a lot of money and require a significant budget alteration or anything like that. So, so far so good.
Okay. All right.
If it changes, I'll let you know. And I think probably through the chair of the committee, they should have at least a preliminary list, maybe out to Joe. But if you guys want it, I don't think there'd be any objections. Probably share it, just so you could kind of see what the temperature of that list is right now.
So I think all we need to hear is what Public Works has got in their wish list as far as the subcommittee. As far as the overall capital outlay, let Joe bring forward that to
Yeah.
the major FinCom as his responsibility. I think
So
it's
you'll,
just-
from our end, 2 vehicles in tax, one in water and sewer, a little bit of money for some water main replacement that we're gonna do. The flat roof at Town Hall and the ACE building, and then for big ticket items, it kind of drops from there. But nothing too scary or too surprising in that.
okay, so we're not talking any big dollars as far as Public Works goes.
No, not yet. Talking $50,000 for a roof here.
Yeah.
60
Yeah.
grand truck, stuff,
You're under 2.5, 250 maybe, which is trucks, in Public Works, and water and sewer is separate, another probably 100 over there.
Yeah, we're pretty average for this. Hopefully that's the trend that continues.
Okay, all righty.
I have just one last question. I know you'd provided us the hard copy book of the budget data. Towards the back, there's the kilowatt hour consumption tables. And I was really surprised to see the police Union Street just so high compared to everything.
That is about 7 times higher than any other building in town.
Yeah, I was very curious as to what that was caused by.
Couple of things. The building operates 24/7, so it never really has any downtime. There is some computer servers in there that maintain some of the records that don't turn off. And the real reason why I included that is so that is some of the ways we're looking at the capital work that we're doing. So anything that we could do, that's required because it's aging out, but then we're really trying to attack those high graphs. So there, we're pursuing a grant to put some solar potentially on the roof of the Civic Center. So we're looking at taking those numbers and then hopefully coming back and showing that some of the interventions that we're targeting are starting to knock those consumable kilowatt hours and things down. So consider that the baseline, and we'll just track it as we go. And hopefully start to see those decline through some of the things that we're doing. We'll get Green Communities is going to offer the town about $189,000, so there should be a substantial lighting upgrade in a bunch of buildings that should start to work to that. But that's just one of the things we're looking at. So when those lines jump out, we know that we want to investigate that and then tailor some work to limit that. Sure.
Really appreciate it. That's all the questions that I have.
Awesome. If anything comes up between, we have a little homework to send you, but if anything comes up between now and Monday, feel free to reach out. If not, we'll see. Probably you step on then, and then we can talk again on Thursday. Don't be a stranger if you think of something.
Okay,
All right, awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and enjoy the rest of the day. It looks gorgeous out.
okay, get home to that baby.
That's where I'm going right now.
Nice.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you.
See you guys later.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.